Alrighty, folks. So we got confirmation that a big balance patch is coming to Hearthstone Tuesday, September 21st. So I guess like 4 days from now or so. And also some teases on what it's going to include. And you can see that right here behind me from Alec Dawson. 5 nerfs across Warlock, Shaman, Demon Hunter. A redesign in Priest. A ban in Warlock. Maybe they're just going to ban Warlock altogether, depending on how you read that. But I think that's just a card ban. And 7 buffs as well across Hunter, Mage, and Warrior. And these are even teased as being medium-sized changes, not just light changes. So this looks like that's a lot of total card changes. That's going to have a big impact on the meta one way or another. Yeah, so in this video, I'll share my guesses for what I think these changes might be and encourage you to share your thoughts, as always, in the comments with what you'd like to see changed, not like to be changed, and where you think Blizzard will go based on this tease. But let's kick things off here with the ban. I think the Demon Seed will be banned in Wild. Of course, I don't think it will be banned in Standard, because then the card would almost not have any reason to exist if it were banned in both, and it's way more problematic in Wild than in Standard. So they teased a card ban. I think it'll be the Demon Seed. Could get nerfed, I guess, as well, but maybe they'll just nerf other stuff in Warlock for Standard and then ban this in Wild. I guess we're going to get a Warlock ban in every expansion at this rate if the Demon Seed gets hit, but I don't know if there's any other way to fix this. It seems to have some fundamental problems in Wild, and that's why its played rate's so obscene. Its win rate is really, really crazy, and I think it's just time to get rid of it in Wild based on what all the Wild experts out there are saying from what I've read. So maybe it's bye-bye Demon Seed. So now let's talk about the card change they teased, a rework for a card. I think it's going to be Elucia. Elucia, he's probably not a card on everybody's radar out there. You're like, wait, what? Elucia? I don't even really think that's a problem card. But at very high levels of play in particular, Elucia's been problematic in the past as like a combo buster where she'd break up combos. Most famously, I'd say OTK Demon Hunter, just ripping the Il'gynoth from your opponent's hand and ruining their deck. And more recently, and more importantly perhaps, she's been played in aggro, shadow, face priest stuff, but not as a combo disruptor, as a sort of almost like super Lotheb of sorts, where basically the face priest will dump their hand and just put a bunch of stuff on board and then follow it up with a Mind Render Elucia with an empty hand, thereby giving their opponent an empty hand and a totally dead turn. Because then the opponent will start their turn, they'll draw like one random garbage face priest card off the top. Of course, there's no removal or anything in that deck, minus maybe a void shard here and there, that's okay. But more or less, they're just stuck with nothing to do, and they just lose an entire turn, and they're dead, all thanks to a single flip here from Elucia. So I think they could rework that so that Elucia retains some of her value, maybe as a combo disruptor, but loses her utility as a like Lotheb style card. And this change here, I've teased, I think would achieve that. If you only got to keep the cards until end of turn, basically you could kind of screw with your opponent's stuff still. Maybe play 1 or 2 cards from their hand, depending on how high cost the cards are and what state of the game you're in. But they'd still get a lot of their cards back, right? So they'd still have an opportunity to do stuff, and they'd be playing from their own deck when they draw. So they might be able to top deck some removal and so on. So yes, you could still ruin their Il'gynoth, but you couldn't do this like crazy Lotheb shutout and totally kill their turn. Now there's a chance Blizzard takes things even further and like doesn't even want the combo disruption to exist either, if they have like combo cards they're one to protect now or in the future. But I think this is kind of a half measure that addresses the current problem for Elucia, but still makes the card interesting and keeps some of that disruption possibility out there, which is important to have combo disruption exist as tech cards, and this would become that instead of this like aggro follow-up. All right, so let's move on to the rest of these nerfs here. We got teased some Warlock nerfs. I think Rune Mithril Rod could go to 4. I've talked about this in like 3 videos at this point. It's just a really, really powerful card. So both making your opponent commit more mana to it and making them play at a turn later can really slow down the impact of Ruined Mithril Rod. And the same exact thing can be said for Backfire. Could also push Backfire to 4. I'm not recommending both of these simultaneously, just that these are possible nerfs I think could impact the strongest Warlock decks. So it was also teased we'd have some Shaman nerfs coming through. This is one I've talked about in the past. I think you could change Lightning Bloom to a refresh instead of a gain so that it can't accelerate out bigger stuff than would normally be possible in a turn. It just allows you to use, you know, the same amount of mana in a turn. So this would be more like a Conjure Mana Biscuit for Mage, but you'd pay the Overload 2 afterwards as opposed to for Conjure Mana Biscuit, you pay the 2 mana ahead of time. So I think it would still retain some utility, you know, allows you to do more stuff in a turn, would still fuel Quest Shaman, but would limit your ability to play like a 4-drop before you're supposed to, essentially, which could slow down Canal Slogger. So I won't go too deeply into this one since we've talked about it in the past. Another change I think is possible is Perpetual Flame. This one is so shocking when you look at the data for Shaman, just how good the mulligan win rates are on this card. And it's because of Quest Shaman, you know, the ability to play this at the right moment totally negates the Overload punish because the quest can tick over at the same time, removing any of the overload that this generates. There's also Overdraft, of course, as well. So all in all, the big downside of this card, which was this, you know, chaining Overload, which was supposed to keep it in check, has become a non-element, which means the power output for this card per cost is just insane. Because you can clear your opponent's entire early game board for only 1 mana, while also still advancing your game plan with Overload quest stuff. So I think, you know, doubling the mana cost here, pushing this up to 2 would slow it down just a little. This is one of those cards where it's like almost could feel good at 3, maybe. I think it would be bad outside of the times you cleared the Overload if you did that. So maybe 2 is a happy medium. I also thought like, well, it could maybe deal 2 damage instead of 3, but honestly, that just wouldn't really ever change. So I think it would break the fundamental functionality of the card. 3 health is such a more important breakpoint for those early to mid game turns, whereas 2 would leave so many things alive. It would rarely ever actually chain. And I think that would kill the card, whereas this would make the card a little bit harder to play, but still retain some viability for it. And then finally, we had a Demon Hunter nerf teased. And to be honest, I looked at Demon Hunter. Nothing stood out like crazy from a stat standpoint for Demon Hunter. The closest thing I could find was Irebound Brute. And that's because sometimes you can get these cheated out really early in a game and dump them. And that's the sort of thing Blizzard has often nerfed in the past. Any sort of really easy power spike, well, not easy, but really cheap power spike early in a game that feels like it can kind of steal games. So Irebound Brute seemed like the most reasonable target, and I don't think changing the mana cost on this one goes a super long way for that, because sometimes they just draw so much that it still goes to 0, kind of like we've seen with Flesh Giant. So I thought maybe you could pull down the stats instead. There's no way this guy deserves Boulder Fist Ogre stats. Come on, get real. So this makes it like a little bit easier to deal with, a little bit less impactful from like a damage standpoint if they cheat down a couple of these early. So I don't know, this is a minor change in the scheme of things and not one that really even jumps out at me, but if they're going to nerf something in Demon Hunter, I think it's probably going to be this guy. Okay, so now we'll move on to some buffs. 7 buffs teased, and we're pretty sure Selective Breather is going to be a part of that because the official Hearthstone Twitter account tweeted out like the date for the patch, including an image of this guy, which I don't know why else you'd include an image of this guy unless he's part of the buffs. So yeah, maybe Selective Breeder will go to 1 mana instead of 2 mana. And I mean, historically speaking, this would be a nut-looking card at 1 mana. Not so much these days, like Knight of Anointment's kind of already in this sphere. Discovers better in some ways than tutoring effects, but this is a Discover and a tutor, but it's still not out of the realm of possibility. That said, I was a little surprised to see Selective Breeder. This has been a card with fringe playability. Like there was like OTK, King Crush, Hand Leok stuff, Leorox stuff that I did with this card in the past. I think I even played that deck to Legend or something. So he's had some like fringe inclusions for sure, but pushing him to 1 could open up more shuffle style hunter stuff. There's been a few cards like Dire Frenzy came back and some other cards in that vein. So maybe Selective Breeder to 1. And then when it came to other hunter buffs, I honestly don't know. I mean, I've talked before about maybe the Rat King, so I thought about including Rat King again, but I wanted to mix it up a little bit. So I don't know, maybe Rodent Nest goes to 3/3 instead of 2/2, making it a little bit more impactful on board immediately. And therefore you're not sacrificing as much until you get to this Death Rattle upside to support all this token stuff. I don't know. This isn't a great buff. It's not compelling really to me, but frankly, looking across Hunter, I just didn't have that many great ideas. So if you have an idea for where you think Hunter could be changed in a more positive way, that's rodent nest or otherwise. Share that in the comments. I suspect there'll be more than just one hunter buff if we're splitting 7 buffs across 3 classes. But maybe it's just the Rat King again, and I should have just included a Rat King buff. I would definitely like this tokeny Rat King hunter thing to work and succeed. So whether it's Rodent Nest or the Rat King himself, I'd be curious to try that. So next up was Mage, and I think there's a couple different ways to buff Mage, because they talked about bringing in, you know, like other archetypes. So I don't think you want to buff anything that would like fuel Quest Mage too much. I think they don't want that coming back so hard so fast. So I thought about Wildfire. We've got this hero power mage that's really only ever been sort of fringe in playability. No actual meta deck got there, just some streamer decks and stuff. So could Wildfire go to 1 mana instead of 2, making it much easier to flex in. Also, of course, putting it on curve on turn 1, save hero power on turn 2. I think that'd be fine. I don't think you could increase the damage by 2 per Wildfire. That might just scale up a little bit too fast. But increasing damage by 1 and doing it more efficiently just gives your deck a little more time and mana to do other things until you get to your big reward for hero power mage. So easier to squeeze in. Now, honestly, if this were a 1 mana card, maybe it could be played in Quest Mage. It's just so cheap, but I doubt it because they don't really want to spend mana hero powering most of the time. So this would be a good way to perhaps buff that archetype without also simultaneously buffing hero power mage. This also would have some neat implications for things like duels. Increasing the hero power damage in duels very affordably could go a long way. We've actually had some success with that already. So yeah, I think Wildfire to 1 would be pretty awesome. Another change could be Clumsy Courier, card you may have forgotten existed, to 6 mana instead of 7. Just speeding up this kind of big spell mage package we've seen in Stormwind. There's a couple other cards, the Inkwell or whatever. I don't think this would break the game by any means. 6 mana is still a pretty slow play in the scheme of things. So just making this a little bit cheaper to help get whatever big spell you want off the ground would be awesome. Maybe this wouldn't even make an impact right now, but some awesome big spell in the future. Maybe this works with some elemental stuff. Who knows? But I don't think it hurt at all to push this to 6 and would open up big spell mage as another possibility. And then Warrior was the 3rd round of buffs teased. And what about Lothar? What if Lothar got 5/5 instead of 3/3? I actually thought, what if Lothar got 7/7? Would that be crazy? You'd keep all the numbers at 7, which feels kind of cool. I actually don't think Lothar would be OP if he got 7/7, because he's still just a singular threat. He still just dies to removal so easily. And he's still 7 mana, even in a big warrior package. I think he'd actually be okay at 7/7. It just felt wrong to push him that far ahead. So what if he got 5/5 instead of 7/7, just giving him a little bit more health to work with, so maybe he's more survivable against rush minions and that sort of thing after taking his trade, and of course becomes a bigger threat on board with higher attack as well. What do you think? Is 5/5 the spot? Is 7/7? Should I make him 6 mana? Does Lothar need a buff at all? Curious to hear those takes. And another way to buff Big Warrior could be Cowardly Grunt to 5 mana, just cheesing out your bigger stuff a turn sooner, essentially, with the Cowardly Grunt. Big Warrior's not absolutely abysmal right now. I've played it to some success. There's actually like some tier 4-ish stuff for Big Warrior out there. Grunt's not bad at 6 mana. I thought he was actually okay, but 5 would make him feel pretty compelling, I think, and would really get that deck moving. And you kind of have to these days with the speed of every other deck and the efficiency in the early game of every other deck. I don't think pushing this to 5 would be out of line at all, even if you're getting Rattlegores down on like turn 6 and stuff. It's scary, but that's just where Hearthstone is these days. So I think Cowardly Grunt to 5 would help open up some big warrior stuff, which I love big warrior. So that sounds pretty awesome. And then finally, we've talked about this one before as well. Pirate Warrior, I think, is something Blizzard wanted to work more, just based on some of the like tweets they had before the expansion and stuff. They seem to really be hyping up Pirate Warrior, and then it just didn't get there. Quest Warrior hasn't made sense. They could buff the quest itself, having Juggernaut do like end of turn instead of start of turn. That's one change we've talked about a lot. I think going to Cargo Guard's pretty reasonable too. There's like a very obvious just stat bump here that makes this a little bit more threatening on those early game boards. So Cargo Guard, maybe some of the other early game pirates, maybe Questline itself are all targets I think Blizzard could consider. So I don't know if they're thinking more Big Warrior or Pirate Warrior, or maybe even just both. So I wanted to include some ideas for each of those. But I would love Questline Warrior to see some play too. I think Juggernaut's such a cool idea for a card that just like long-term grindy value portal stuff. I love those like portal cards. Discard Warlock for Ungoro back in the day too, right? So yeah, if this helps Pirate Warrior get there, that would be a very welcome change indeed. And that's it, I think. Those are my nerf and buff ideas. Yeah, I think some of these would certainly help improve the state of the meta. So wouldn't hate seeing these. Could be some surprises in there as well. But all in all, some cool stuff. So which of these ideas did you like? Which ones did you hate? What other cards would you like to see changed? Do you think the redesign could be something else? Do you think the ban could be something else? Is the whole class banned? I hear all those thoughts and more down there in the comments below. And stay tuned. It sounds like we might get the patch notes on Monday and then the patch on Tuesday, but somewhere next week, stay tuned for the official patch notes on all this stuff. So curious to hear your thoughts until then. Thanks much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.